What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to your classes. My name's Greg. In today's video, we're going to give you some tips for gig economy. We're going to go over driving full-time versus part-time. How much can you really make driving or delivering? How to set good goals and how to achieve them. And then using the gig economy to essentially upgrade or elevate your life. So I'm going to start with just should you do this full time. Now for me as a driver, I've done this part time, I've done this very part time, I've done this full time, and I've done this very full time. Now what I mean by that is when I first started, I went all in. I was a full-time driver. I was driving for Uber and Lyft, utilizing both apps, which is obviously the only way you should drive. You should always utilize both apps. And I was pushing anywhere from 50 to 60 hours a week. And I even had some weeks where I went as high as 70 to 80. Now, one app alone won't let you push that many hours. And that's why I say to combine both apps. If you're going to be a full-time driver, you need to have both apps active. Otherwise, it will clock you out after 12 hours. Now, personally, now looking back, I don't recommend driving that heavily. I would say that part-time driving is generally going to be the safer option for you. Now, the reason why I say that is a lot to do with what's happened with Uber and Lyft over the years. Over the years, the rates have dropped. When I used to drive full-time and I pushed upwards of 50 or 60 hours, I could generally make $1,500 to $2,000 a week. Sometimes I could even do that in 40 hours, and I had weeks where I went as high as $2,500 to $3,000. Now, the rates were a lot higher then. There was a lot more bonuses then. But the reality is, at the end of the day, this is a lot of mileage on your car. It is a lot of wear and tear, and it's probably a better idea to do this part-time. Now, the reason why I think that is you can still make a decent living driving this full-time. It's still very doable to make $1,000 to $1,500 a week, and every now and then you might make $2,000 a week. But for the most part, $1,000 to $1,500 is probably what you're going to make on average for full-time driving. Here's the problem. While most people can look at that and say, hey, that's pretty good money. I can make $50,000 a year, give or take, and I'm my own boss. I have my own hours. I can drive and work when I want. That's the other half of the equation. The things you got to think about is what are your gas costs? The wear and tear on your vehicle. A lot of these things start adding up, and while you can write all of that off, and we will talk about that in a later segment, it still does add up, especially the mileage and the wear and tear on your vehicle. One of the things that happened to me early on as a driver is I had gone out and financed a car. It was a 2016, and I think this was 2018 at the time, so a fairly new vehicle, and it had only about 16,000 miles on it to when I drove off the lot with it. Within a year and a half, I had put 165,000 miles on that car. And the thing is generally if you're driving a car more on the highway, the mileage isn't as bad for the vehicle. But when you're driving for Uber and Lyft, you're going to do a lot of braking, a lot of things that aren't as good for your vehicle with time. Generally, they say city miles are worse for your vehicle than highway miles. So, that being said, what ended up happening to me is that car I had, it was a Nissan Altima. After a year and a half, I don't even know if it was that long, maybe a year and a couple of months, I needed a new car. The reason I did is I had already put 160-some thousand miles. I now have a high mileage vehicle, but on top of that, it needed a lot of repairs. And I was paying for a lot of other stuff at the time, so I didn't really have the money to repair the car too well. And so what ended up happening was every mechanic I went to essentially told me that I should just buy new. They said, listen, you've got a transmission light on in this car. You've got about $5,000 to $6,000 in repairs. Your best bet is just getting a new car, because if that transmission goes out right after you pay for all these repairs, it's going to set you back even more. Now, unfortunately, I was still making payments on this vehicle, and I still owed about $7,000 on that car. So the only thing I could do was go to a new car lot because I didn't have the money to buy a car in cash. So I had to go to a new car lot where I could utilize rebates and use those rebates and then wrap my existing car loan into my new car. The end result is I got a Nissan Sentra, and the total payment was about 25 grand because I had to absorb about $7,000 into that. Now, that's not something you hear from everyone. There's a lot of ways to avoid that. Obviously, if you have a lot of money in savings, you know, you can hypothetically just be getting your car repaired as it needs and ride out each vehicle as long as you can. But in most cases, this is a lot of wear and tear on the vehicle, and it will add up quicker than you think. So I recommend part-time driving over full-time driving for that reason, but also if you have a job already, maybe you own a business, and if you already know you're making, you know, $1,000 to $1,500 a week, adding on an additional $500 a week with Uber or Lyft or Rideshare is much more valuable than quitting or doing this full-time and just trying to make that 1 or 2K a week, because the end result is the main reason why you want to do gig economy work like Uber, Lyft, and delivery services is because you have that freedom. But when you're driving full time, you generally don't get that freedom. You might think you do. I mean, you get to decide when you start and when you stop, but there are still certain hours and certain times that you need to be working. And if you're not working those hours and those times, you're going to make less money. So yes, you can have a schedule and flexibility, but if you're a full-time driver, it doesn't really work that way because you have to be out there at the best times. A lot of times that's sacrificing your weekend and working really late on Friday and Saturday night. Those are some of the better times to drive, which we'll also cover later. So we've kind of touched on full-time versus part-time. Your realistic numbers as a part-time driver, I mean, that's going to depend on what your part-time hours are. As a full-time driver, you should make anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 a week. And I will be the first to tell you, it's more than likely going to be closer to 1,000, and you might even have some weeks where it's just under that. So you need to really think about if full-time is the right way. Part-time driving, you should be able to make $250 to $750 a week additionally, just from driving part-time. So now, the best thing you can do, and what I think is the most valuable way to utilize Uber and Lyft in any gig economy job, is to use it to elevate your life, to take a leap, to take a step. The best decision I ever made in my life was I started selling solar from my car. Now, that probably sounds really weird, and you guys are probably like, what does that mean? All that means is I signed up to be a commission-only sales rep for a solar company. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, so obviously it's a hot commodity here. And I asked my boss if, like, hey, you know, I kind of want to experiment rather than sitting in an office and cold calling all day. Are you opposed to me driving Uber and talking to my passengers about the benefits of going solar? And I explained to him why I thought this would be a good idea, because the one thing I had noticed in my time as a driver was that you get some really valuable networking opportunities. You get the chance to talk to people in a way you generally don't ever talk to strangers. And anyone who's been in sales for some time knows that if you can start that many valuable conversations a day, you're going to make a sale if you're a good salesman. And even if you're not, it's still a much easier way to get an organic conversation going and talk about what you do. So what I started doing is I always make it about the people. I never made it about myself. I never appeared anxious to talk to them and pitch them and tell them what it is I do outside of Uber, but I would start asking them questions about their life. And as we talked and as the conversation slowly progressed, eventually they would ask, well, Greg, what is it that you do? Is it just Uber and Lyft, or do you use something on the side? And I would just be like, well, Mr. Passenger, no, I actually sell solar. That's my main profession. And I would always say it's my main thing. That is what I mainly do. And I've used Uber and Lyft to supplement my income because I'm a newer sales rep. And I was just really honest with them. And they'd go, okay, so, you know, tell me about solar. And I'd say, yeah, it's a great product. It's no money down. Federal government gives you a tax credit for going solar. On top of that, you can probably save $50 to $100 on your power bill, and you lock in your rate so that you're fighting against the inflationary rates from your utility company. Oh, wow, that's pretty cool. And I'd say, yeah, you know, honestly, if you'd like, I can get you a free quote. All I need is a copy of your utility bill, and if you like it, great. If not, hey, just still give me a 5-star rating if you don't mind. And they would always laugh about that. So very simple conversations. And I ended up getting to a point where I was making 1 sale a week on solar. And that eventually got me to a point where I really didn't need to drive Uber and Lyft, but I kept doing it because the networking was that powerful. So I highly recommend you guys get a sales job, a commission-only job. Talk to your boss, be vulnerable, tell them what you want to do. And that's an easy way that you can now make an extra 1 or 2K a week just from your vehicle. Or you can be lazy about it and you can just talk to them and be nice and everything, but you're squandering an opportunity. The tips are great, the money's pretty good, but there is an opportunity for you to really take a hold of your life in a completely different way if you want to. And that's by using this to propel you even higher and even further in life. So if you guys want any advice on a career you could seek out, feel free to shoot an email to us and we can set you up with something that might be a good fit so that you're not just wasting your time while you're driving, but you're doubling up your income as much as you can. Hope you guys enjoyed this first class. I'm really excited to keep sharing with you guys. Have a great rest of your day, and I hope you crush it out there.